So, quick audience poll. How many of you have ever dreamed of just packing up a suitcase and starting over somewhere else from scratch? Let's get a show of hands. So like roughly half of you. This is like one of the least regretful audiences I've ever seen. Only half of you have ever dreamed of starting over. That's great. To the other half of you, congratulations on your excellent life choices. We are about to hear now from a man who did exactly that. He started over, packed a suitcase, and went to Silicon Valley, where he knew basically no one. It turned out okay for him, though, because he is now the founder and CEO of Close.io. He has been called Silicon Valley's most prominent sales hustler, and he's also an author of a book called The Follow-Up Formula. Please join me in welcoming entrepreneur Steli Efti.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you. All right, this is the clicker. This is funny. We went from somebody speaking about how to send humanity to outer space to now me speaking about how we sent a Greek guy living in Germany to America, right? So that's going to be the transition. So first of all, show of hands, should be most of you, who has no fucking idea who I am. Just be proud and raise your hand. Just yes. This is very important for my ego. All of you have no clue who I am. You're like, I'm already sitting here. The last talk was interesting. I'll give you a minute. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I am a walking, talking oxymoron. I'm originally from Greece, but I grew up in Stuttgart. Yes, one person. Woo to you too. There you go, another person is clapping. We have two Swabians in the audience already identified. So if you know nothing about, well, some of you should know something about the south of this beautiful country. Greece and Germany, especially the south of Germany, are not really cultural compatible, right? They're the two opposite ends of the European cultural spectrum. So growing up, I had a lot of cultural friction that I was creating and that I was part of. I grew up in a factory worker family, typical immigrant story. I grew up hating school, not participating in anything that was useful or valuable, not being a real member of society of any kind. And I remember distinctly one moment, and this is a little bit of a critical thing, and it has changed significantly because I've been living in the US for 10 years now. But I remember when I was young, look at one day, I was always, I always had like this calling for greatness. I thought I would do amazing things in life, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I remember one day looking at the DAX companies, like the top 50 biggest businesses in Germany, and looking up the names of the CEOs in those companies. And every single one of them was male, an older gentleman, and had a very German name. Right? So as I was, and I think by now it's not as true as it was 10 years ago, but going through that list, I was like, holy shit, I will never be a CEO of a big German company. Well then, what's the point of being in Germany? And that's the moment where I decided I would have to leave eventually. A few other things have happened, on my path of discovering entrepreneurship as a true option for me. And when I was 17, 18, I dropped out of school. I started my first business. I was very lucky with that first business, and it went pretty okay. I did a few more businesses in Germany that were successful, and then 10 years ago, I had an idea for a technology company, and I had no fucking idea about technology, no idea about software or the internet. In Stuttgart back then, this is again 10 years ago, 2007, nobody really around me knew anything, and I thought, you know what, this was the moment I was looking for. Let's launch a Greek all the way over to the US, and I decided to buy a one-way ticket to Silicon Valley, and all I had with me was a ton of ignorance and arrogance. And to demonstrate this to you, when I arrived at SFO, I literally went to a person and said, hey, I need to get to Silicon Valley. How do I get there? All right, there's like 3 or 4 people that know Silicon Valley is not a city, it's not a place, it's an area. It's like arriving at Frankfurt Airport and going, how do I get to the south of Germany? You need a little bit more specific instructions. But people are really nice in California, so the guy was like, Palo Alto, Stanford. I was like, Stanford, I've heard that in movies. Yes. He's like, all right, get on the BART, then 2 stations later, you get on the Caltrain, and then step out on University Avenue, and boom, you're in Silicon Valley. So I arrived there, and really, I thought I would change the fucking world within 12 to 14 months, give or take. I gave myself some buffer room. And I thought that, eventually, I would be Time Magazine Person of the Year, Steve Jobs' best friend. He still lived back then. And that was kind of the whole reason of my existence, the purpose for why I was on this planet. And I had this idea that I was really attached to and I thought was like the greatest idea ever. Here's my first day, because this is actually useful advice. So my first day, I took the wrong station. I didn't go out on University Avenue. I went out on California Avenue. California sounded good. So I walked down Cali Ave, and I see 3 blocks down, Hotel California. And I'm like, I've heard this in a song. This must be a sign. This is where I'm checking in. This is my new home. And this is what I did. This is what happened next. I set up my room in the hotel, and what I really wanted to do, and I think, this is a typical human issue, is I wanted to be comfortable for the day. So I was like, it's my first day, I might have a jet lag. I should just stay in the hotel room. It's safe, it's my office. Maybe I'll watch a movie, I'll relax. I have my whole life of changing the world and being Steve Jobs' best friend. Let's take it easy. And then I had this little voice in my head, and this is part of why some people know me. I know it's not you, we've clarified this. None of you people know who I am. But some people know who I am. And one of the main messages that I give to people is to tell that little voice that tells you to be comfortable and take it easy and stay home and not do this, to shut the fuck up, right? And this is what I told myself. I was like, you're a fucking idiot. You can't be, this is your first day in America, and you're gonna stay in the fucking hotel room? You little bitch, get out of the room and make friends, right? So I went out of the room, went on meetup.com, found there was an event and a dinner, went to that geek dinner. Next, talking to all kinds of people. Next to me was a gentleman sitting by the name of Robert Scoble. And Robert Scoble was one of the biggest bloggers at that time. He had massive influence, millions of readers. He was like a super tech influencer. And he asked me, hey, who are you? What are you doing here? And I was like, yeah, this is my first day in America. I bought a one-way ticket. I don't know anybody. I'm just here for adventure and for changing the world. And he was like, oh, that's kind of cute. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Let's hang out. Next day he calls me. He picks me up from Hotel California. He's like, let's have a coffee. We go to have a coffee. He sits down. He starts off asking me who I am. And then he goes, oh, wait. Goes back into his car, brings out the most massive camera setup ever. Like, there are no smartphones. This is pre-iPhone, people. Sets it all up and goes, all right, let's now go. Who are you? What are you doing here? And he interviews me for a whole hour. It's the worst interview of my life. I watch it every year at least once, just to stay humble and grounded. It's one of those things, when you watch something and you are embarrassed for that person. Well, so it's a 40-minute interview. The first time to watch it, it took me 4 hours. I was doing this. Play. Ooh, pause. All right, play. Oh God, pause. It's not that easy to find, but it's also not impossible. But this is the image. This is me, my very first day in America. Yes, I don't know why you applaud, but all right, I'll take it. And he interviews me, and if you watch that interview, my God, like my English is horrible. I look like a goofy idiot. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's beautiful. And after that interview, he goes, hey, Steli, what's your plan for the rest of the day? I'm like, the rest of the day? I don't have a plan for the rest of the fucking year. He's like, well, I'm talking at this conference. Do you want to come with me? I'm like, sure. So we go to this conference. He speaks. 2 other speakers are there. And at the end of the whole thing, there's a 20-second soapbox. So a few members in the audience could go on stage, get the mic, and for 20 seconds have an ask to the audience. And usually it'd be something like, I'm raising money, blah, 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 or I'm trying to hire a technical co-founder, come and speak to me. And again, I was sitting there in my chair, and my little voice was like, you don't have anything to pitch. You don't really need money right now. It's your first day. Take it easy. Just sit here and enjoy the moment. Don't ruin this day's been going so well so far. And then again, I was like, well, shut the fuck up, right? Just go on stage and ask for the one thing you really, truly need. And this is what I did. I went on stage and I took the mic and I said, hey, people, it's my first day in America. I need friends. If you need a Greek friend, I'm available. Come and talk to me. And the audience went apeshit. At the end of the talk, there was like the 3 speakers with a few people and me with a swarm of humans. People were waiting for like 20, 30 minutes and eventually gave up and just threw their business card to me. Like they're just like, call me. I want a Greek friend. And for the next 2 weeks, all I was doing was having dinners, lunches, breakfast, brunches, going to after parties. This party, I met the founders of Airbnb and Dropbox when they were just nobodies. I was hanging out, living the life. It was all beautiful. I was even
doing so well, I was inviting other people that are coming from Europe. Since I was an expert now a few weeks into America, I'm an ambassador for Silicon Valley. And I was inviting even people that were coming to visit the Valley for wine. Now, I don't know who knows this gentleman just raise your hand. Well, I'm glad you people don't know him either. This is the founder of the fucking conference. This is the guy that made this conference happen, right? This is like 9, 10 years ago. I paid for that wine. This is a good lesson, people. Karma is a beautiful thing. You want to invest in relationships. You want to invest in people early. You never know when it's going to pay out, right? All right, so you're thinking, oh my God, what a beautiful story. He's going there, he's rocking and rolling every day, kicking in doors, screaming at people, having success. That was what my first 2 months looked like. And then the next 5 years were excruciating pain and suffering. I basically, with that startup, I don't want to ruin the whole talk and kill the suspense, but I did not make Time Magazine Person of the Year. I did not become Steve Jobs' best friend. And I failed spectacularly with the company that I went there to make a success. I made every single mistake. No mistake was too small or too old for me to repeat, and I did every single one at least 3 times just to be sure it's a mistake, right? I just fucked up everything. And the company was actually dead after the first year, 1.5 years. It was clear this thing isn't working. And for the next 4 years, I would walk around with a fucking skeleton and pretend it's fine. I was like, no, it's fine. All it needs is some water and some bread and some food, and it's gonna get alive again. Don't worry, we're about to be successful. This is gonna turn into something beautiful. It didn't. And eventually I was so broke emotionally, financially, spiritually, that I had to admit defeat. It was almost like somebody dying that I dearly loved. It was so difficult to accept failure. I hated it. But then, a few years later, once I accepted defeat and death, I was actually able to take all the lessons learned, all the mistakes made, and turn it into somewhat of a success today. And this is a good lesson. Like every overnight success really is due to what you've done. Everything you are realizing today, all your success today, everything you have today is a result of the efforts that you put in the past. If you want more shit, that's a problem for us as humans because things in the universe happen with a delay. You think, oh, I'm really successful right now, and you slow down because you equate current effort with current results. And then all of a sudden, why is this not working anymore? Or you put in a lot of effort, a lot of hustle, a lot of pain, like you really put everything in it, and you're like, why is this not a success? I've been working really hard for 2 days, right? Things take time. It sucks, but it is the way it is. So I'll update you on what I'm doing today. So after all the suffering and pain, after admitting defeat, I launched another company with a friend of mine. And that company went through Combinator. That company raised millions of dollars from all the most famous investors you could imagine and billionaires and all that good shit. Got press. Oprah became friends with Ashton Kutcher. All that good shit. All that stuff that you would think success looks like. And we started a company which was called Elastic Sales. And Elastic Sales, what we did is we helped startups and technology companies that were in B2B to develop a sales model that was scalable, and then to hire all the salespeople for them and scale their revenue efforts. And we had done that with over 200 venture-backed startups in Silicon Valley. For a while, we were like the secret sales lab of Silicon Valley. There was not a single VC who didn't know us. There was not a single CEO in the B2B space that wasn't talking to us. So we knew everybody's problems, everybody's challenges, everybody's secret hacks, how they developed sales pipeline, how they scaled. And from day one, we had developed a piece of software to help our salespeople outperform others. And that's the company that I'm running today. It's called Close.io. It's an inside sales CRM. And Close.io is making millions and millions of revenue. It's highly profitable. We are a tiny team. Just to give you an idea, we're 25 people. They're all remote. People all around the world, with one employee in Berlin, even an American. And the smallest nearest competitor that we have, the smallest nearest competitor has 250 employees. The smallest team we're competing with directly, 250 to 25, and we are bigger in revenue than them. So, but I don't just have this software business, and I don't just help founders with their sales issues. There's a little podcast I run with one of the smartest people in Silicon Valley, Hiten Shah. His his reputation in Silicon Valley is that he's the most generous founder in Silicon Valley. What a beautiful reputation to have. Most generous founder. He's a brilliant marketing mind. He's launched multiple multi-million-dollar companies. We have a podcast called The Startup Chat. If you go to thestartupchat.com, you can subscribe. Twice a week, we launch an episode. Usually Tuesdays is all about tactical stuff, like how to do a cold call, how to write a good email, all that shit. And then Fridays, we just talk about whatever the fuck we want, how the death of our parents affected us as entrepreneurs, religion and startups, anything we find interesting. And there's a lot of people around the world that enjoy the podcast. But I don't just launch software and podcasts. Oh no, this is not the right direction. I have written a number of books. Since I didn't finish school, I'm qualified to be an author and teach other people how to do things. So if you're like, I can't get enough of Steli, I want all this shit and I want it all in one click, you can send me an email. Usually it says bundle motherfucker, but I wanted to like make this a bit more professional. This is a German audience. I don't know you people. So you just send an email saying bundlemofo@steli@close.io. You'll get all my books, all my templates, all my shit. Sounds good? Cool. But I don't just launch software and podcasts and books. I also launch Little Americans. These are my two boys. To be fair, I didn't really, I helped launch them. My wife was the technical co-founder, and I was more of a support and business development role. And can somebody take a picture so I can send it to them? We communicate over WhatsApp. They're in Stuttgart right now. And so I can tell them that I had them on stage with me, right? Because thank you, my man. And every time I leave, they're like, why are you leaving? I'm like, I need to go and tell people stories, and they'll laugh, and it's good for my ego, even if they don't know who I am. And they're like, what's an ego, Daddy? I'm like, well, it's also good for the business. They're like, can you give us some money? All right. So, but I didn't want to just share my story here. I wanted to actually summarize hundreds and hundreds of German entrepreneurs' story that I've observed. So this is an interesting phenomenon. Since I've lived in Silicon Valley now for 10 years, and I'm fairly well known over there, almost any time a German goes to Silicon Valley, for short-term or long-term, they kind of get connected to me. I'm meeting German people every fucking week. Right? So I've seen hundreds of Germans that come to the US and want to stay there over the last decade. And I've found 3 paths to Silicon Valley that all can work, but they're not equally good and advisable. So we'll go through them, and that's going to summarize the talk. So the first path is the one I had chosen. This is the worst one. Don't do this. It is verboten, to be very German. Right? That works here. It is, you're gonna get a fine. It's not, I am not allowing you this path. It's path number 1, which is brute force, just by ignorance and arrogance. And usually it's not by people like me. Usually people that are fucking Kanaken, and like immigrants in Germany, didn't finish school, don't have any qualifications. They don't come to Silicon Valley. I'm the least educated person I've met in 10 years in Silicon Valley. I've yet to meet somebody that has less credentials than me. So that's not typically who is in that first bucket. You know who's in the first bucket from Germany? The most successful founders from Germany. VCs that go over and say, you know what? I was a founder. I sold for hundreds of millions. I was a VC. And now the next venture is going to be in Silicon Valley. Founders that sold for 30 million, for 40 million. People that were really, really successful in Germany or in Europe. They come and they try the brute force approach. They're ignorant and arrogant. They're like, I know how to do shit. I have money. Now I'm going to do it bigger, right? With the sun 12 months a year. Like, why is that not a great idea? And then they face the brutal reality that it's very fucking hard to do, anywhere else in the world, but especially in Silicon Valley, not because the place is special, just because there is an insane amount of competition. It's like you were doing amazing. I don't want to do any comparisons here. Forget about all of this. It doesn't matter. It's very, very fucking difficult. When you arrive in the valley and you are the most amazing person from Europe, they don't give a fuck. They don't know you. Nobody knows you. Nobody has worked with you. You don't have a local reputation. You don't have friends. You don't have people that have known you for years so that you have a network to be able to hire an amazing team out of. And everybody's competing with you. Everybody's hiring. And the people that compete with you either have a shit ton more money and glamour and PR and are the hottest shit ever, or have the advantage that they've been around for 30, 40 years and they've known these people and worked with these people. So when you try to hire somebody, you're competing with somebody who's known that person for 10 years or 5 years. It's not going to work. Almost every single person that's incredibly successful here and goes over Silicon Valley, 4 years. I've done a study on this. 4 years, and then they go back. Because they're German, so they give themselves 5 years to figure out if this is going to work. And after 4 years, they're like, fuck it, I'm going back. And it's not because they're not smart. It's not that because they're not capable. The biggest challenge they have is they don't have access to amazing talent. They don't. All they get is the scrap that's also just arrived in Silicon Valley, never had a job, still looking, struggling. These are that talent pool that you have access to. That's why my first company sucked. I was totally clueless, and everybody I hired was equally a nice person that was clueless. Right? So we made up a huge team that just didn't know how to execute on that highest level. Don't do the brute force thing. Also, the arrogant part of this is that back then, 10 years ago, if you had told me to work for somebody else or take it slowly, I'd be like, fuck you. I can't work for anybody else. I'm an entrepreneur. I was an arrogant prick. All right, don't do brute force. The second approach is the frequent visit. This is the most German approach, probably. I've seen this very successfully applied, where some people, they know long-term it might make sense to either move to the US or even not move. Some of them are just like, maybe I'll do some business in the US. So what they start is they start building a network. They visit every quarter. Like I have a good friend. When I just arrived, he had visited the Valley a few times. And for the past 10 years, he's been there every 3 to 4 months. For a week, for 2 weeks, for vacation, for hanging out, for networking, for a conference. He was there, and he had nothing to do other than make friends, meet people, get inspired, and then he would come back to Berlin and be a very successful person here. Eventually, he had a product that he wanted to sell in the US as well. Guess what? He had 4 years of networking. He had friends, he had people. People knew who he was. Right? So when he launched in the US, he got customers like this because he knew these people. And then once he got a bunch of customers, it was really easy for him to hire the first person in San Francisco because he had known that person for 4 years. You don't have to live there to know people. Like even if I live there, I don't see you more than twice a year. Like I just don't, right? So eventually, he was so successful over there that they opened an office, and they're crushing it in the US, they're crushing it in Europe. He had massive success, and I've seen this a few times, where somebody's just going back and forth, building a network, building a reputation, building a name, and then when they have something ready to launch, it's much, much easier. The third way, and the best way, the most successful way I've seen so far, is a springboard approach, but that actually needs you to get rid of your own ego. So I've seen this with 3 people that came, and they were smart enough to go, I was a successful founder. I sold my stuff for 40 million euros, but I don't know anybody in San Francisco. So here's what I'll do. I'll find a team that is killing it, that is still early, 10, 20, 30 people, that has raised some money, and I'm going to join. I'm going to be an employee for a year or 2 and do whatever they need me. Here's my skills. Here's what I can be really valuable with. I'll join. I'll do anything and everything I can do to help you crush it. But I'll tell the founders from day one, hey, in 2 years, I'm going to launch my own company. And I'm probably going to take a few employees from here to launch it with. And I'm going to want you to be my first angel investor. Is that cool? And people in the Valley go, fuck yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So I know 3 people that did this. They joined a company that was doing really well. They helped grow a bunch of things. They did really well there. They built a network by working with people, not just going to events and meetups. And then at the 1.5 year mark, they found their technical co-founder, they found their first employee within the company, within their colleagues, and they left having the founders as investors, having the investors of that startup invest in that new startup and crushing it. Crushing it. Just needs you to have a little less ego and take a step back before you take multiple steps forward. That's the approach I would recommend to everybody, and that's the approach I was not wise enough to take myself. That's it. From Germany to Silicon Valley. I don't know how to launch people into outer space, but I love to be in outer space one day. If you have questions, if you want to visit the US, all of you will meet me one way or another. But if you want the direct way instead of the indirect way, you can always send me an email, steli@close.io. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steli. In case anyone wants to throw a business card at him, he will be around later to accept those. Well, we are moving.